Sounds great.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. This is our second chat or talk with Josh and Rachel Rasmussen. I highly recommend people, the audience who are watching this video, to watch the first part where we discuss retributive version of eternal hell. In this talk, we will talk about the free will versions and a little bit of practical effects on eternal hell, practical effects of eternal hell, right? So, okay, how are you both doing?
I'm so happy to see you, Rajan. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Doing very well. Thank you so much for having us on.
Great. Okay. So, just for the audience, I want to say, like, my views have been changed since uh, uh, since our part one talk. Like, after our part one talk, I thought about like retribution more, looked at a bunch of philosophy papers and stuff. And I found that, well, it's really hard to justify that. And also it's like, uh, I think when I also think about like consequentialism and deontology, consequentialism or utilitarianism made more and more sense. And I'm not a retributivist anymore. I think uh, utilitarianism, classical act utilitarianism of like Henry Sidgwick and Jeremy Bentham is the correct view. And yeah, my belief in God is still there. I still believe in God. I still believe that universalism is true, or like uh, all shall be well eventually, right? Everyone shall be happy eventually, right? No one shall suffer forever. No one shall be lost forever. No one shall really die, right? Like, like that soul death or something. Yeah. Okay. So,
Wonderful.
Something I just, if I may, Rajan, something that I've really appreciated about you ever since I've known you
yeah.
is that passion for truth that shows up in you updating your views. Oftentimes you'll send me an email with some update, and it's usually based on serious study of many different authors and then thinking it through on your own. And I
Yeah.
think that's very cool. It's a model. It's a special thing to see. And I think that, even just kind of thinking through ethical theories, you sent me an email displaying to me a depth of understanding of political theory and ethical theory, and to
Yeah.
kind of see the intellectual progress is fun. It's inspiring to me. So I just wanted to point that out for your audience. Your
It's
audience should be excited about this. Whether
great.
they agree or not, they should be excited about that process.
Yeah.
It's the mark of a true philosopher to be able to go through all of the different topics and think them through to be able to say, what do I think about this for myself? And that's what I really appreciate about some of these discussions is that, you know, let's consider the view, put it on the table, try it out and see what comes of it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you to both, right? I mean, it took a while to change my views, right? It was a slow
Mhm.
process. It's like, as Joe Schmidt would say, like evidential chips, right? Like sometimes there are evidential chips on this side, and then there are evidential chips on this side. Uh, this side just has more, right, evidential chips, and the other side, when you think more about them, like the things that seem like evidence do not really seem like evidence anymore, right? And by the way, I also saw your talk with Amy Karofsky, Josh, on necessitarianism, right? I think it's necessitarianism. And it was great. I think Joe, I think you did that chat on Joe Schmidt's channel, right? His channel is like Majesty of Reason. And it was great. I think I, I I have no problems with necessitarianism. I think it's probably true, I think, because it's like when I think about God, right? And God has like 0% chance or 0% probability of ever messing up, right? Like he never does something that will ultimately be bad or cause pointless suffering, right? And okay, so I thought, okay, if there is like 0% chance that he messes up, then what does it even mean to say he has a free will, right? Like he could really do otherwise, because like I think what makes him God is that he can never mess up. Like every time you are in his presence, like for sure that he cannot mess up, he will not mess up, right? uh, uh so like it seems to me that, well, what's really the problem with necessitarianism? I think to a lot of people the problem is actually with libertarian free will, people get retribution and moral desert. Like with libertarian free will, people get retribution and moral desert, right? uh I think they believe that they are really important things, right? uh but if you're not a retributivist, right, uh, and do not have uh, much to care for like moral desert, because I think in my like examining of so much stuff with respect to moral theories and stuff like normative ethics, I found that like you can still have good, bad, and right and wrong with necessitarianism, right? If you are like a deontologist or even a consequentialist, I think Michael Sloat had a paper where he argues for uh, hard determinism and its compatibility with moral realism, right?
Mhm.
So what you only if you are a necessitarian, what you only lose is retribution. And I think that's it. That's what you only lose, because with necessitarianism, I think there is one great thing, which is, and if you believe in God, the greatest thing is, well, God has everything planned out, right? Uh, we can be 100% sure that eventually everyone is going to be okay, right? With necessitarianism, it's like very meticulously planned, right? So, so I think,
What do you think about the idea of having stages of indeterminism, where those indeterminism stages, they don't have as their fruit desert or blame, as you put it, but they just have as their fruit certain exciting experiences that aren't determined in those stages, even if the overarching theme of reality has a determined positive outcome. I wonder if there is an abundance of riches. So like if there's only one way reality can go, and if the root of reality is perfect, then that's a reason to think that things will go in a positive way, even if negative states reap other positive states. But then if reality is not such that there's only one way that reality goes, then still you can have a positive outlook, like an anticipation that things will go in a positive direction, because the only times that there's indeterminacy, those are temporary stages. and those are for the sake of certain experiences of maybe uncertainty or surprise or adventure, things like that. You know, what do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, so I suppose you could say, like, would like randomness or uncertainty that is just there, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's compatible with the view that I'm leaning with, like necessitarianism,
Sure.
probably. Yeah. So I would say, I think,
Go ahead.
yeah, so with respect to libertarian free will, even if I think in the previous chat I did believe in both of those, right? Retribution and libertarian free will, and I still believed in universalism, right? So I think universalism, I do believe it's compatible with retribution and libertarian free will. I think it's
Yeah.
just that with necessitarianism, uh, it's much. I think with necessitarianism, it's harder to justify retribution, right? Uh, so it's like you can get universalism. I think totally universalism is compatible with both retribution and libertarian free will, right? But it is just that you have to argue more carefully with that. So yeah.
Totally makes sense.
Well,
Yeah.
I was gonna say I have another idea to throw at you, which is another form of everything being determined or necessary, but from a different perspective. So the way that determinism is usually described, there's an external reality that is planned from an outside being like God looking in upon the world of all the humans interacting, plus whatever other angelic beings or other beings that there are. And it's all this big, it's almost like it's a play where everyone is playing their parts, and it's all being orchestrated and directed from the outside, or even from the inside. You could say that there's promptings from the inside, like little cue cards helping people to know what to do at every moment, right? But the whole frame is usually given from the outside, that there's one overarching picture that it has to take step A, then B, then C, all the way through step Z, and that it's all spelled out ahead of time. There's another way of thinking of determinism that is, I think, very different from this view, but I want to just propose it. It could even seem like it's possibly a little bit challenging the traditional view, but like let me just propose this idea. If every being from the inside is innocent, as in they have the perception of their perspective, but they also have limited awareness. So they don't know all things. So make a distinction between the being and a perspective and God. So God has all perspectives, therefore knows all things, therefore can understand the best possible utilitarian outcome, or if there are multiple outcomes that could be equally beneficial, God would be able to calculate and know that from the utilitarian perspective. But every created being is, in a sense, locked within their own perspective, where although innocent, they are limited. So they don't see all things, they don't understand all things. So whenever there is some choice to be made, every single being always makes the best choice. So in a sense, it's deterministic. Every single being always, by necessity, makes the choice that they believe is the best. But from the outside perspective, it doesn't always look like the best choice, right? Because somebody else might say, hey, that I wouldn't have done that, right? Because we all have different experiences, right? So anyone from the outside could say, that wasn't the best choice. But from within the perspective of that one individual, it looks like it's the best choice.
Yeah.
Therefore, if they encounter that situation, it is deterministic. They will make this choice. Now, you can make the argument that there's not just one choice. That's what I would tend to think, is that there's not just only one choice. There's a landscape of choices, but let's just say for argument, there's only one best choice. Then the proposition is, from each perspective, that one being that's limited, that does not know everything, that has a history, prior experiences, prior meanings of what things are, prior models, moral exemplars that they've seen, social conventions, cultural conditioning, all of these things that we say go into a person's psychology, a person's perspective as they grow. All of these things influence their reasoning and their emotional dispositions and their intuitions. All of these things are interplayed so that as the person is deciding in every moment what to do, every being is actually calculating what is the best choice. And they must choose the best choice because that's what they want to do. Every being is always looking for the best choice.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is deterministic that every being is choosing the best choice. However, the outcome is not deterministic because for each being is navigating the reality with their limited perspective, making the best choice that they can, in a sense, creating a new path as they go, even though their algorithm to always choose the best choice wherever they end up is deterministic. What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
It's a backwards way of thinking about it. And you could also add that you say the outside being, or the being that encompasses the all, is also in a sense observing or having a benevolent desire for all of the beings to eventually, even despite their limitation, to come to some benevolent outcome or benevolent conclusion. Therefore, if the beings are making the best choice they can, but they're all falling off a cliff, like that, there can be some divine intervention to, illumine the path for them, to say, hey, look, this is what's happening over here. I know you guys are not seeing this and not understanding this, but here you go. Here's a clue. And then it sort of like steers the beings in their limitation to then see, this is, now I understand, this is actually a better choice. So there could be a combination of the all in all directing the events, or having the benevolent desire for the outcomes, but that the determinism is actually in the form of each of the individual beings always having the impulse to make the best possible decision from their perspective.
Yeah. So, one of the things about necessitarianism and like the problem of suffering or problem of evil, I think with necessitarianism, the straightforward answer could just be that certain events needed to happen for maximization of everyone's happiness, right? Including the person who suffered, right? Now, of course, to the person who is suffering, from their perspective, their suffering seem obviously pointless, right? And obviously too brutal. But God sees certain connections, right? Certain future connections, and he sees, and the future is also like determined, right? So he already sees everything from past to the future, right? So with necessitarianism, it's much easier to just respond to the problem of evil in a, I think, in a satisfying way, right? And along with that, I think this connects to the free will view of eternal hell, basically the C.S. Lewis like view of eternal hell, where it's a lot of emphasis is placed on the choice of the person, right? Like the person chooses eternal hell, right? And I always thought that, I think, like from my perspective, from my consequentialist or utilitarian perspective, one of the things that inspired me to move towards utilitarianism is like Richard Yeater Chapel's article on bleeding heart consequentialism. And he writes like, okay, rather than thinking about like right wrong in sort of deontological way, why not think what's more important, right? Like what's normatively more important, right? What fundamentally matters? And one of the things that Richard said is that the central thing about ethics, normative ethics, right, is like beneficentrism. So that view just means like helping others and helping yourself is like centrally important, right? Like what could be more important than saving and improving and creating like happy lives that are like wonderful, that are enjoyable? Like what is more important than that? And thinking about it, it's like, yeah, I don't find anything more important than saving, improving, creating happy lives. By improving, I just mean like if they are sick, you heal them so that they can experience great pleasure, right? If they are suffering, you you reduce their suffering, right? Or like uh, you alleviate their pain, right? Uh, so it's like when I see that free will view of hell. And I think, by the way, Josh and Rachel, I think that free will view of hell is like much more popular right now uh, with uh, Christians like William Lane Craig and many others, right? Like the person in hell, like continue. Even Jerry Walls, I think, believes in that free will kind of hell where like people who are like in hell, they just enjoy it. They just keep sinning and then they get punished. They just keep sinning and they get punished. So it's like the problem I always had with those sorts of like choice based view of eternal hell is like the emphasis is placed on choice rather than the welfare of individuals, right? Because when you start thinking based on welfare, right, like if in eternal hell the person has like positive overall welfare, then we would say that, okay, relatively compared to heaven, the person in hell is like have much less welfare, but still it's positive, right? Even if like suppose in eternal hell the life of every person is barely worth living, right? Which means the person has like very small positive welfare overall, right? The life is still worth living, right? Even if it is barely worth living, right? So the moment you say eternal hell has people whose lives are barely worth living, well, it doesn't sound like hell anymore, right? I think in some sense, because it's like the traditional view of eternal hell. And by the way, I'm not just saying traditional in Christianity. I think in all three mainstream religions, not just three, four mainstream religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam. In all of these four mainstream religions, the traditional view is like hell is a place of torture, right? Retributive torture, right? It's just that like in Hinduism and Buddhism, the torture is done so that the person's uh, crime could be like washed away or something. I mean, it's like They just deserve the amount of suffering they caused,
Right.
right? But in Christianity and Islam, well, retributive hell is eternal. There will be torture. People will want to escape it, but they won't be able to. But this free will, choice-based view of eternal hell from like C.S. Lewis, like always sort of confused me, right? It's like, I mean, if the life is like worth living, even if barely so, it's still worth living. So
So, it's interesting. I think the motivation for a free will model of hell
yeah.
is exactly coming out of the view that you were describing, Rajat, about everything being necessary and God evaluating whether or not a certain amount of suffering is worth it by some calculation that uses the divine mind that none of us finite creatures could ever understand.
Yeah.
So the idea is some people start to think it doesn't seem like you can actually justify morally that some being outside of me could decide whether or not it's good for me to be going through large periods of suffering when I didn't even have anything to do with it. It was all just a script decided by some other being. It's kind of like the philosophers inquiries into the idea of there
Yeah.
being little people inside your mind like trying to control you and make you do things. It's like, well, who's doing it? Is it God doing it? Is it you doing it? And so I think it actually does come down to the feeling of what is just. So if you combine the idea of eternal hell with the idea that God necessitates a path in which people are suffering either by finite degrees or especially by infinite degrees, somebody might say, well, that's a moral outcry. How could a perfect being decide that certain finite beings would ever deserve this punishment or that suffering or, and then, so there are people who do readily accept this, in Christianity. These people would tend to be more in Reformed theology, Calvinist theology.
Yeah.
They admit that God actually does just love some people and he chooses to reject others, so somebody might question whether that's true. And if they do, and I think it is a reasonable assumption to question that. Then the question is, well, then who would be responsible for such a horrible outcome? It couldn't be God. It couldn't be God who puts all these people in eternal hell. It must be the people themselves. They're the ones who are bad enough to put themselves in this predicament. There's nothing God could have done, so now there's all the philosophical explorations into, God can see all the multiverse or all of the, modal possibilities of what this being would have done in every circumstance, and so if somebody ends up in eternal hell, well, I guess that being, there's just no other path that they could have taken. They were damned from the beginning. There's just nothing they could do. And there's nothing God could do either. So then it's, it's totally up to their own free will, whether or not these modal possibilities exist. Let's just say that is completely opaque or that is completely non-existent. There are no modal possibilities. It's just that in every moment, every person is just deciding for themselves what to do. But let's just say they just freely reject all the way until the infinite consequence is upon them and there's nothing that they or God can do about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the motivation from my perspective is that outcome is more palpable, it's more agreeable, because it puts the blame of such a horrible outcome on the humans themselves rather upon God that we think is a perfect being, and we would think that probably God wouldn't want that outcome. So that at least is my understanding of why there would be such a motivation to move that direction. So I don't know what Josh has to say about that, but I would love to hear.
I love that. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I could have put that better than myself. I mean, just in terms of the motivation for having the kind of a free will picture of hell. Because if it's not based in freedom, then just like what Rachel was saying, then you're kind of stuck from the beginning in one path that God himself was in charge of. So
Yeah.
then it almost seems like God would be blamed for that. And how does that fit with God having a love for us and a desire for our welfare? And then on the other side, if you go to the free will model, I thought what you said, Rajat, was very interesting. And I was kind of pondering this in terms of welfare, because either you say that hell is a place where everybody has a positive welfare. So the suffering isn't greater than the pleasure. There's greater happiness in hell than sadness or whatever. Well,
Yeah.
then you're not going to call that hell at that point. So the problem of hell is the
Yeah.
problem of if there are beings that have a negative welfare. And you mentioned Jerry Walls because I think he's got an article where he suggests that maybe those who are separated from God could still have a positive. It's still better for them to exist. So there's still a positive overall. But
Yeah.
what I think you're concerned with, Rajat, is the scenario where people experience overall negative welfare. It's not better for them to exist. So then the question is, well, why do they continue to exist? Is God stuck keeping them in existence? You
Yeah.
know, is God's hands tied? If God had hands, his hands are tied behind his back. He has to keep these beings whom he loves in existence because of something that they freely did.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting because when I think about this as a parent, I imagine if I take my kids to the park and I
Yeah.
want them to have the freedom to play. See, freedom is valuable because it contributes to the welfare. It's a gift that contributes to the welfare of the people who are free, right? And you
Mhm.
see where I'm going with this, because if the freedom contributes to their welfare, but if I know that there's this bottomless pit in the park, and my poor little Chloe, if she freely gets too close to that bottomless pit, she could choose. Oh, the gift of freedom is so good for her welfare that she could choose to fall down that pit willfully. I say, hey, Chloe, please don't take that step. And then I, as her parent, grant her the power to freely, just, Dad, I'm mad at you. I don't want to listen to you. I'm telling you, I would not do that. I would not. I mean, there's that verse, love always protects. Like I couldn't. If I love her, I'm not going to give her that freedom, the freedom to ruin her life so that she's experiencing a negative state forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
Um, that to me would call into question my real love for my daughter. That's where I think freedom is valuable, but then you have to ask yourself, how valuable is it? So I give my
Yeah.
kids freedom to run around and play, but am I going to give them the freedom to ruin their lives forever and ever and ever?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what could be more important than the very life of the person, right?
Right.
Their very
Yeah.
lives at stake here, right? It's like, and since I'm going to respond to what both you have said, because you have both said some really important and wonderful things, right? Before that, I also want to give you both an example, like a real life example. So, like my mom, like so so my mom lives away from me right now. She's a doctor, all right. She is in another city, and she arrives every weekend, like Saturday and Sunday, right? Every weekend she is here, and oh, I tell her, like, there's so many accidents that happen, right, in this world. There's, like, statistically it's risky to, like, be here, like arrive here from that city uh every weekend, right? But she still wants to just be here, like be around me and my grandmother, right? So it's like parents want parents want to be with their children, and their parents, right? Even if it's risky for them, right? So if a parent just lets their child suffer forever or just die, no, that's not true. That's just bizarre, right? Like, parents are not like desire satisfaction theorists or something, right? Who say, I'll just let him do what he wants, and oh, he wants to kill himself, so I guess what can I do? Like, no, that's just stupid. That's just It's just immoral, to be honest. Even the desire satisfaction utilitarians actually do not think that desire to kill yourself, uh, that you should be allowed to kill yourself even if you desire, because you by doing that you are preventing yourself from like future desires, right? So you're preventing yourself from future desire satisfaction, right? So with the free choice view of eternal hell, so the person does just desires to be in a horrible state, right? Or even in a state where their life is barely worth living, right? Even though it's like net positive welfare, very low net positive welfare. And you just let them choose because, well, that's their desire, that's what they want. So, but like that's not how anyone behaves or want to behave in real life to their loved ones, right? Because sometimes we do force people to not do something, right? And we do force them by physical force, not like the way that our friend Thomas J. Ord, who is like doing open and relational theology, where God cannot like do physical, like do use his physical powers, right, to like hold someone. Like, no, I'm not going to let you go there, go to that horrible place. So in relational theology, according to Thomas J. Ord, God always like tries to persuade people, right, rather than like use physical force, right? So, but I always think that, well, I'm a utilitarian, so it's like, well, look, if physical force maximizes welfare, it maximizes happiness of everyone, and especially maximizes the happiness of the person who is trying to go to hell or trying to suffer, right? And you already know that like their life, they will suffer a lot. You already know that. Then if using physical force maximizes pleasure, right, or happiness, and it reduces pain, right? So you could say in this way, it maximizes pleasure minus pain, right? So if it does that, then do it. Then use physical force, right? Because what fundamentally matters is the welfare of individuals, not their continuous like freedom, totally free choices, right? Like, I mean, even God. Yeah, sorry.
It's
Go
like
ahead.
no, I love this, Rajat. It's like my 1-year-old, a child. If he's desiring to go out into the street and run around just freely, I'm going to physically force him to not run around in the street. And even if he has a desire to do that, it's like what you said. Maybe he could satisfy his desire to run into the street, but the parent knows that actually that's not going to be something that he really wants in the long term. So the parent, out of love for the child, can protect the child and restrict some of the freedoms so that their welfare is overall maintained.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then you as a parent will also suffer. I mean, this is what I think about in terms of welfare. If my children are suffering, how can my welfare be happy while I know that the people that I love the most are in agony? I mean, there is this kind of problem of like, how could there even be a heaven if there's a hell? Right? Like how can there be a place where people are happy if they actually love the people who are in net pain and unhappy? It's
Yeah.
always been kind of a puzzle, and it's not that people don't have things to say about that. I mean, there are things to explore there, but
I mean,
I think
to
that
be
the
honest,
welfare.
they
Go
say
ahead.
bizarre things to justify that eternal hell. To be honest, Josh, like one of the things William Lane Craig says is like, you'll just forget them.
Does God forget? Does God's omniscience go
Mhm.
away?
That's the one. That's the kicker. Because you
Oh
can
no,
say that
God is so
God
mature that
erases. Yeah, because I mean, the claim that I've heard over and over again is that, you know, God erases the minds, the memories of all of the people that ever had relationships with those in hell. And so they don't remember. But yeah, good point, Josh. Like, what about God? Does God not suffer, or does God erase his own memory?
he doesn't suffer. He's so mature that he can have full conscious knowledge that the beings that he loves are suffering, and he can be completely blissful and happy about that. Maximally.
So mature, or so cold?
Yeah.
I
I
don't know.
mean,
I don't be trite about it. It's just these are things that I feel like, let me just say, kind of in my own intellectual journey, I think there
yeah.
would be data points that I wouldn't almost like accept as real data points because there's a theological fence that says, well, that whole view is off limits. And so I think that some of these points about, well, how can people be happy in heaven unless, sure, their memories are erased, but then how does that work? Like, what if part of your testimony or part of your story includes memories of people who are now separated in hell forever and ever and ever? Well, then those parts of your story have to be erased too. And it sort of interferes with even like the positive story of your own life. Um, and other things like, what about God? How does that work there? Is God just happy? And I think that there was a time in my life where I had a kind of theological fence that saw these considerations, but didn't really allow them to enter into my consciousness to feel the full ramifications of them because they were off limits.
Yeah.
Because the view that all are saved was sort of considered to be outside of the bounds of a certain package of views, which to me is a bit ironic in a way because I actually think that it is the view that makes the most sense of fundamental reality being purely positive and good and just and kind and loving. And it's also a view that I think is testified by people who experience encounters with God and get information about this topic. So if there's revelation on the topic, it tends to draw attention to hope, even if there's also suffering. The endless suffering is not something that I believe is revealed through any kind of divine revelation.
Yeah. I mean, to me, sometimes when I hear these defenses of eternal hell, sometimes my reaction is more like they're not tactful sometimes, right? They're not. Uh, yeah. So God is going to erase my memory of my mom, or my mom's memory will be erased about me. I would react to that as I would react very strongly, you know, like, you know, yeah, yeah, it's like, just stop. Like, that's just the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Like, why is their free choice so important? Why is that retribution particularly so much valuable, more than their well-being, right? More than their very lives, right? It's like, from my, when you're a utilitarian, you stop thinking about this whole doing and allowing distinction, right?
Mhm.
Where, hey, if you kill someone, that's bad, but if you just let them die, that's not bad, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like, you know, to be honest, it's like, first of all, God cannot do that. If he allows this, he does it. Like, that's just it. Like, any sort of philosophical word games will not make me somehow like think that, oh, God just allows that. He doesn't do that. It's like, no, he does that, right? You allow something that is within your power to easily prevent, right? Just like this, you did that, right? So it's like, it's the thing with those sorts of defenses of eternal hell are just totally implausible. And this whole free will view of eternal hell, as I said, right, from my standpoint of utilitarianism, it's like, okay, why? Okay, I have to ask God, okay, why are you putting some people? Why are you putting some people in hell such that their lives are barely worth living? Why are you doing that? He cannot say retribution because he's utilitarian, right? He cannot say retribution. His main goal, main principle is just one principle, that is maximize happiness, minimize pain, right? Or maximize welfare, or you can say maximize pleasure minus pain, right? So he has to say that putting some people in eternal hell generates so much pleasure for others, right? It generates so much pleasure, so enormous amount of pleasure, that all the pain that these beings will suffer forever in eternal hell is like uh not much compared to the pleasure that is generated. So the pleasure, generated pleasure is so great compared to the suffering of those people in eternal hell. God has to say that, right? But then how I think about our experience of pleasure and pain, it seems obvious that a sadistic person does not get so much pleasure from a brutal torture of another person, right? The person who is being tortured brutally by a psychopath or something, right? The person who is suffering, their suffering easily is stronger than the pleasure of the sadist, right? So if you just think about the empirical or the experiential data that we have about our lives and lives of other people, we will find that it's just totally obvious that eternal hell is just unjustifiable if you do not use some kind of retribution, right? Or like some kind of weird deontological view where like metaphysical free will of that individual who is suffering is so important, much more valuable than pretty much everything else, right? Love, compassion, well-being, right? Kindness, or even some of the stuff like, you know, art and creativity or something, because like if people believe that creativity and art are like objective goods in the lives of people, then those who are suffering, well, they cannot do those brilliant arts, right? Or something, arts and
Well,
music.
it's
Yeah.
so interesting because it's like, I think it was last time that we were talking about the article where they were taking the sum of all of the suffering over infinite amounts of time, and they were trying to make arguments based on how much total suffering there would be.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking as you're talking, Rajat, that when you're thinking about the experiential data, if I am having some amount of suffering or some amount of happiness, it's difficult for you where you're at to know how much suffering or how much happiness I have where I'm at, right?
Yeah.
So from your perspective, it's not just immediately experientially accessible what my
Yeah.
experiences are, and likewise for myself. So if you
Yeah.
think about any sort of a summation calculation of all of the created beings and say, well, God is calculating maybe in a utilitarian way that there's going to be greater amounts of joy in all of the creation. If some of these beings over here suffer to this degree, then you try to calculate how much joy data there is over suffering data, and you try to see, well, how much does it add to total? That you can imagine that God is doing that. However, I want to challenge that such an endeavor is even possible, because if you think about what the physicists are discovering about the nature of our reality, it seems as though the reality that we see outside of us is actually more like the code of a program that when we encounter it, the reality is generated from our perspective. So it's kind of like if you come into a video game and,
Yeah.
my kids like to play Minecraft. So they come in and they interact with each other in the same world. They can see each other from different perspectives, but it's generally the same source code.
Yeah.
But it's literally their own character, their own avatar that is displaying what the pixels are around them so that they can, in a sense, fabricate what the whole world is based upon the source code. So this isn't saying that the world is completely imaginary. It is saying, though, that for each person, they are essentially in the center of a whole universe of experience. So for each being, they are the center of a whole universe of experience where if they are suffering to a very high degree, their universe is a hellish universe. Like they're
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
experiencing all the joy and bliss that's out there somewhere. Like they have no access to that. Like their Minecraft screen is, red and glowing and whatever, is like that's what they're experiencing, right? So it just because somebody else is experiencing joy and bliss somewhere else and their experience is a heavenly experience, that doesn't mean that in a sense you can even add those experiences together to sort of have one conglomerate experience of like, oh, this is the, heavenly experience with a little bit of rough edges. Like it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess what I would say is that there is no external summation of all the experience data of all the humans, for example, that could ever yield a result that God is calculating that it's worth some beings being allowed to suffer and others not suffering, so that, oh, well, overall, there's more joy than there would have been if these beings weren't suffering over here. I don't think there is such a calculation that could be made, because I don't really think it's a way of understanding things that actually maps on to how things are. And that's just my own thinking on it, given,
Yeah.
right now, my current perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. So Henry Sidgwick made, I think, a similar point as yours, where Henry Sidgwick wrote like a big book, The Method of Ethics, and in his book, Henry Sidgwick himself believed that he failed to argue for utilitarianism only, right? He failed to argue that only utilitarianism is true, because one of the things that he was having trouble with was like reconciling egoism and utilitarianism, because with respect to egoism, it's like, well, to every person, only they have immediate access to their pleasure and pain, right? Only they have immediate access, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
it is easy for them to get to I matter, right? At least I matter, right? It is easy for them to get to that, but to go to I matter to everyone equally matters, right? Going from that for Sidgwick it was hard, right? So like Sidgwick had like a complicated method of like determining which intuitions are more basic, right? More sort of self-evident than other principles, right? And he had a criteria for satisfying those points to like get to a particular principle. And he found that utilitarianism and egoism had each principles that like conflicted with each other. Like utilitarianism, the main principle utilitarianism has is like principle of benevolence, right? Which is that everyone equally matters and everyone's pleasure and pain counts equally, no matter the person, the animal, anyone, right? And then there was another principle. Well, what does it mean to say like I, right? Like there was this principle. I cannot say what the principle was exactly, but it was related to like um the the uh, the specific individuals do not have access to pleasures and pains of others, right? I think it was really related to that, right? That principle. So the utilitarian principle seemed to conflict with that other principle, right? So it's like you cannot just, to Sidgwick, you like you could not just add up pleasures and pains and then say that overall pleasure is pleasure is overall pleasure is more than pain, right? So yeah, I mean, I know objections to utilitarianism, but I mean, I'm not going to defend utilitarianism in our current chat, because I do think utilitarianism is true, right? And we can do that, right? Like add up pleasures and pains and say that pleasure is overall greater than the pain. But it's like the objection to utilitarianism with respect to this implication, right? Utilitarianism has this implication where if one person is like suffering horrendously but generating great pleasure for others, the utilitarian will calculate, and if the utilitarian finds that the pleasure is much greater than the pain, right? Like there is net pleasure, right? Then utilitarian would say, oh, utilitarian say will to that poor guy who's suffering, sorry man, I cannot do anything to help you.
Well,
Right.
and for any view, there's different interpretations. There's different ways of applying the same principle.
Yeah.
So I think there's many ways to interpret utilitarianism that, some of them are perhaps following the intuitions that you or I might have right now currently as we're thinking about it. And some of them might not fall in line with our intuitions. So I do think that there's some room for filling out the view.
Yeah. I mean, there are like lexical versions of utilitarianism, lexical threshold versions. Lexical threshold just means that some values are more important than others or something, right? Lexical importance. So lexically means like in a hierarchical sense, right? So even a little of the lower value, even if the infinite of lower value is not enough to overcome some amount of higher value, right? So yeah, there are, but of course there are objections to even that view too, right? So I mean, it's like because one of the thing was like, as you talked about that paper, right, where they say they like calculate pleasures and pains in that paper and say, well, hey, look, eternal hell is justified because such and such, right? But it's like when they are doing all that stuff, they are not just being like classical act utilitarians, right? They believe in retribution, right? That's why they are saying that that's why they have to say like God feels infinite pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And since someone caused God infinite pain, so they deserve that pain. But classical utilitarians do not think that, right? They believe that, okay, even if God felt infinite pain, he should still not cause infinite pain to others, because, well, what matters is, well, maximizing pleasure, right? Or like maximizing pleasure minus pain, right? So and another important thing they said was like, it was connected to a paper by Richard, similar to a paper by Richard Yetter Chappell on negative utility monster. So just to say what utility monster is that, so a utility monster is someone who gets a lot of pleasure from doing something bad, right? Imagine any horrible thing. He just gets so much pleasure that, well, his pleasure outweighs all the pain that others are suffering. So we should still like continuously give him more pleasure, even though, well, half of the world is like suffering or something, or like half of the world is destroyed, right? Utility monster ate everyone, right? So there is a case of a negative utility monster. So a utility monster who is in immense pain, right? He's like suffering every moment of his existence is like Holocaust level pain. And the only way he can get out of that pain, is to, well, cause a lot of pain to others, right? So the compassionate thing or the benevolent thing to do is to let that negative utility monster who is suffering Holocaust level pain to cause others great pain, such that his welfare is increased and others' welfare is decreased, right? And we end up with like a world where we have to satisfy that negative utility monster who is suffering Holocaust level pain every moment to make sure the world has positive utility or something like that, right? So it's like even the deontologist in that case seem to bite the bullet, because if the deontologists think that the person who is suffering the most matters, the most, such that we must reduce their pain, right? Then even that deontologist will have to bite the bullet on like negative utility monster. But the problem with all this stuff and using negative or positive utility monsters with respect to God is like, well, first of all, God is not a monster. God is not suffering horrendously, right? And there are so many ways to maximize pleasure minus pain, right, that do not involve torturing forever, right, or killing someone, right? Because there are so many pleasures, right? So many different kinds of pleasures, so many different kinds of positive experiences, right? So it's like using any sort of this stuff about God feeling infinite pain, right, or God getting infinite pleasure from horrendous suffering of someone else, right? It's just a non-starter, right? Like because it's like every time, like, so the way I respond to these utility monster scenarios is like, I say that, okay, look, for every utility monster case, you can make a parallel utility angel case, right? So a utility angel would be someone who gets enormous pleasure from helping others, right? From making their lives better, right? So a utility angel is God, right? He wants to make the world a better place, a wonderful place, and he's not suffering horrendously, right? He's not in infinite pain or something. And every time he does help someone or make the world a better place, he gets a lot of pleasure, right? He's happy, and, well, everyone's happy, right? So it's like these sorts of like bending the reality, right? That paper basically did that, right? That which argued that God feels infinite pain whenever like someone steals $2 or something, or like whenever someone rejects God, fully knowing, right, everything he knows. Like some of the people, even William Lane Craig says that, like, rejecting God is like a meta sin, right? It's like a huge, huge lexical sin. Like, it's so huge that justifies infinite suffering, right? Infinite punishment or something, right? So it's like you just bent the reality, right, to get to that view of God causing infinite pain, right? You had to say that this sin is meta sin, right? This one is very bad. This one is like lexically bad, right? Infinitely bad. That's why that thing is justified. But I would say, like, just let's appreciate our reality more that we are in, and just appreciate that freedom is not so valuable to overcome, like, compassion, love, and the welfare of people. And along with that, retribution is not so important, right? that like makes people like suffer forever or something, right? And in reality, there are no utility monsters, right? At least from our experience so far, right? So it's like, let's appreciate our reality more, right? Our experiential reality. And just based on that, it seems universalism is the correct view, right? Obviously the right view. Yeah. So
If
any
I could
thoughts
just
on
kind
that?
of
Was a lot.
summarize.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Rajat. It's very well put, and I was kind of organizing kind of the big structure of what I hear you saying. So
Yeah.
the structure that I would kind of summarize would be like this. So either you have a kind of deontological moral landscape, or
Yeah.
you have kind of consequentialist moral landscape, perhaps a utilitarian. If you have a deontological landscape with retribution, for example, well, we talked about that in the first part. So we kind of did our analysis there, right? So then we're moving on to um, the view that hell is not justified by the sort of deontological principles, but rather by allowing people to have free will, to have the freedom. So then we divide and conquer again, because within the free will scenario, you have, I mentioned the utilitarian view. But then you could also think that, well, yeah, let me just keep it there. The utilitarian free will view. And then your point is that, okay, if the best thing is to optimize welfare, then you're only going to give people enough freedom that's going to optimize their welfare. And
Yeah.
so if the freedom is going to lead to infinite lack of welfare, that's the point where you're going to not give them that freedom. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I'm sort of thinking of your analysis. It's sort of a divide and conquer. It's not even saying that you have to believe in utilitarianism to be universalist. It's just that no matter which road you take,
Yeah.
utilitarianism, deontology, act utilitarianism, rule utilitarian, you're like going through every single road. And then you're saying, well, that road actually, when you trace it, it just leads back to universalism. Every single road on your analysis
Yeah.
is not going to be able to justify conscious beings being infinitely and perpetually separated from God.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, as I said, right, you have to bend reality to such that you can use either deontology or utilitarianism to justify torture, right? By bending reality, I just mean like saying, okay, God is a negative utility monster. He gets
Yeah.
Holocaust level pain when someone steals $2 or something, or he gets Holocaust level pain when he's uh like someone rejected him, like someone said, "Go away, dude." Like when someone just said that to God, God is like, I don't know, like having a nervous breakdown, you know. So it's like, yeah, if you bend the reality so much where God has to torture someone to like get like relief or something, such
Mm-hmm.
that the torture is not as painful as the pain that God is suffering. So whether you are a deontologist or a utilitarian, you'd say, yeah, sure, let God torture that guy. But it's like you just bend the reality, right? You just bend
And
to
the
the reality.
reality,
You
yeah,
just
right. Like if God's a consequentialist, then God lets people go to hell forever and ever and ever because God gets so much happiness from that.
Yeah, or
Right? So
relief from pain. Yeah.
yeah.
Or like we
So
said last time, God basically, do we think of God as being more mature than us or less mature than us? Because, I mean, my perception is that if God is a perfect being, he would be able to be a bigger person to absorb more. He would be able to tolerate more
Yeah,
than what
obviously.
we could
Yeah.
tolerate, right? So
Yeah.
if we steal $2, and then oh, like I can't stand it, like that person stole $2 from me and I flip out, like I think that if someone stole $2 from God, like God would be more okay with that, like he'd be more cool with it, like he'd be
Yeah,
more
obviously.
understanding, right? So
Yeah.
so the idea that because God's an infinite being, he has infinite suffering, I think someone needs to question that premise right there, because I think as a limited being, like if I'm thinking of my 1-year-old trying to accomplish something like building a tower, and if he's trying to build a tower and it falls over, he's going to have way more suffering than if I'm trying to build a tower and it falls over and it's like, oh well, I'm not going to be screaming, having a temper tantrum on the floor, but it's
Yeah.
because I'm more mature, I can handle more, I have a greater tolerance for more variation. So, we might just extrapolate God is the greatest being with more powers than we have. So, if someone rejects him and says, I hate you, maybe we have a meltdown and we go and hide in the corner and we just can't show our face because we're so humiliated and ashamed. But do we think that God is going to have even more suffering than we have? I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
guess
mean,
I would question that premise.
exactly, right?
Mm.
It's like not infinitely suffering is obviously a great making property in my view, right? Like not
Yeah.
infinitely suffering from like someone told God like get lost, and
Right.
then not, and God not suffering infinitely from that response is a great making property, right? Like obviously. So it's like, let's not bend the reality, right? Because
Mhm.
you can destroy any ethical theory with that, right? Take any ethical theory, virtue ethics, deontology, utilitarianism, contractarianism. If you bend the reality to say, okay, this person is like getting so much suffering, pain, or like this person is going to lose all their virtues, right? If this person does not like torture another person, right? So you can make an ethical theory recommend something that is generally awful because the situation is awful, right?
Mhm.
That particular reality is awful. A deontologist will have to accept negativity monster eating or like torturing others. Same for utilitarianism, same for virtue ethics, right? That's the thing. So let's not bend the reality, right? To fit eternal torture, right? And also let's not bend morality by saying free will is so much more important than the welfare or the very life of the person, right? Let's go with common sense intuitions and the experiential data or evidence, overwhelming evidence that we have uh, about our reality, right? And when you go with that, universalism seems obvious, just totally obvious. Okay.
I'm right with you on that, and I'm just sort of thinking about kind of again my own intellectual journey and the way in which something that maybe would seem more obvious to me now didn't seem obvious in the past. And then I think, well, what changed? I think that one thing that would change is that sometimes there are certain considerations that, as I was saying before, are kind of behind a certain fence, where the fence sort of blocks me from thinking about them or noticing them, or they're not really in my view so much. And I wonder what you think, Rajat, or maybe Rachel, you could speak to this too, about maybe those who are in the audience, and then they might be thinking that, well, all this sounds good, common sense, but human reasoning is fallible, And if
Yeah.
God has already revealed to us, the truth about the fate of people, then we need to let our human reasoning sort of bow down to God's revelation. And some people might think it's pretty clear what God has revealed about this. I wonder what either or both of you think about this kind of concern people may have.
Yeah. So I suppose I should let Rachel go ahead first, because I'm
Okay.
yeah, because I'm personally not currently religious. I do not currently subscribe to any particular religion. I just like to call myself optimistic theist, right? Optimism means just like everyone shall be happy, all right? Everything is going to be okay. So it is influenced by Christian universalism, of course, right? But since I'm not a Christian, so yeah, I'll just let Rachel go ahead, and then I will respond to that.
Yeah. So it's very interesting to think about I guess the framework that someone who's raised inside a religious perspective is coming into. Basically, from, if you're born into, for example, a religious family, or you're raised going to church or to mosque or to temple or wherever you are raised, or if you have all your friends and family have this similar viewpoint, there are certain things that from a very young age, we're sponges and we absorb what we hear and what other people model to us. So there are certain things that I think from a very young age, especially because parents tend to, well, at least historically, parents have tended to treat children very much like, why, the children says, why should I do this? And the parent says, because I said so. The authority dynamic between the parent and the child tends to be very strong, or it has in the past. I think that might be changing, but that's a separate conversation. When there's such a strong frame, it often can appear, as you're growing up, that certain things are black and white. This is how it is. Even if I don't understand, it's my job to just not question it, but to accept it, right? So now you imagine that the whole society is raised in such a way.
Yeah.
So they go to the education system. They are in the government. They, like the government says to them, follow this law, do this thing, do that thing. And no one questions it. Or if they do, they're social outcasts, or they go to prison, right? So no one questions what the authority tells us to do. And the feeling is that if you break the law, you were bad, you were evil. If you follow the law, you were good, right? So if, in the same context, if you are in the religion and you follow all the precepts, all the theology, then you were good, you were safe, you're one of us, if you are not, you're excommunicated, you're outcast, you're, apostate, you're whatever, infidel, you're. So this is the same thing, in the education system. If you are following everything the teacher says, then you are a straight A student. You are going somewhere in life. You are successful. If you don't listen to what the teacher says, then you are in trouble. You're not very smart. So there's all the positive affirmation and social conventions, social pressure to conform to what we all agree is the right way to think. And there's also the social pressure not to do the things that we all think as the taboo, like, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, don't be one of those kids who drops out of school. Don't be one of those who grows up and rejects your religion of your youth and compromises with the world. Don't be one of those who, gets to be rebellious as a teenager and ends up in prison. Don't be one of those who, goes off to the outskirts and becomes the outcast, right? Like, so all of the society in all the domains of life are giving us this frame and, in a sense, like molding us with the sort of convictions that even become moral convictions, that this is black and white, this is objective. They become internalized. So we start to have the feeling, if I question this, oh no, am I doing something wrong? Like, you start to feel guilty, you start to feel nervous, you start to feel anxious. I don't know if this is the right thing. I don't know. So in a sense, all of those outside voices of what you should do even becomes internalized into your very moral ethic and your rational arguments inside your own mind, for how you're being justified in your own actions and your own behavior. So you can ask, like, how free is a person to really have their own thoughts and to think about these things on their own. And I mean, I can tell you that, when I was very young, kind of being raised inside religious context, I would think that I am thinking independently for myself, but I wouldn't understand that actually I am regurgitating the things that are told to me, that it seemed true to me, so I repeated it, right? So that is actually not the same as thinking for myself, because what I'm doing is I'm just kind of like rehearsing. I'm having a mental rehearsing of things that I've seen or the things that I've heard people say, and okay, that kind of rings true, so I repeat it, right?
Yeah.
That's a very different way of encountering the world than to basically have your whole understanding of what the world is and how things are, and everything to become completely smashed, or to become disoriented, to become confused, and then to have to like put together all the pieces to basically search things out, like, oh, what's this, what's this, and you're feeling things, and you're trying to come up with your own understanding of what something is, rather than relying upon what the tradition says, or what your parents said, or what the society said in general about these very issues. So I think that if we understand how much those are, I guess, they're human challenges that we face. It's the human condition that we are all born into, no matter what country we are born into, no matter what religion we're born into. We all are in the similar situation where we can, be in the situation of trying to navigate the reality as best we can. While also, I think we are literally all trying to make the best decisions, trying to come up for, like, what is making sense of things. And I think for some people, the answers that are given to them are satisfactory. And, if somebody says there's an eternal hell and God will do this, and this is what it says in this book, then, they're not going to question it, because okay, like, I guess I don't really understand it, but I don't understand theoretical physics. I don't understand the intricacies of biology. I don't understand the human body. That's why I go to the doctor. I don't understand so many things. So how could I ever, understand the metaphysics of the universe and theology? How could I ever understand that? So, for some people, like, it's really difficult to analyze every single belief that we have about the world. It's almost impossible, I would say. Like, we have to have some starting point to navigate anything, like, I have to understand to some degree. I have to just assume that, in the next few seconds, my computer keyboard is going to be here, because, that's how I operate my life. I operate my life using my computer keyboard and coming and expecting that if I come into the room, I'm going to see my computer here. If I go downstairs, I'm going to see my children. If I, wake up tomorrow, there's still going to be an earth. And, like, there's some things that I have to take for granted in order to even just operate coherently. Right. So I think that if we really just consider the broader picture, I think there are some people who are very interested in these deeper or larger questions about, what really is going on. And they really do care to come to the foundations of something and to really feel it for themselves, to say, okay, I think I see this. This is solid ground. This is a shadow over here. That's not real. That's not real. Oh, okay. I think I feel something here. This seems right. This seems solid. And there are some people who will do that in whatever domain of life, and not everyone will do that for every domain. So I think those who say, well, it is just revealed, the pastor in the church told me there was eternal hell, and this is how we interpret this passage. I mean, I'm not a Greek scholar. I don't know. So it just is the way it is. Like if you try to pull that away from me, this is my whole life. I mean, I come to this church every Sunday. I trust this person to guide me. Like, how can you, just tell me that this isn't true? I mean, this is going to destroy my whole routine that I have, And so I think, and then that's maybe one level of it. But I mean, from another level of it, it's kind of like if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, you have a bad case of strep throat. I'm going to give you some amoxicillin. Here, take this pink liquid stuff, right? So, I mean, for some people, they don't question that. They just say, okay, and they take it and they drink it and maybe they get better. And so that's it. That's the end of it, right? So, I mean, there's some level of trust and there's some level of, like, it's not really everyone's purpose to think about it. Like, not everybody's interested to think about it, right? So I think that if you go to the doctor and get the amoxicillin for your strep throat, I mean, to the person who's doing that routine, it feels true to them that this is the best way to get over strep throat, right? To somebody else who has the desire, who thinks that if you take amoxicillin, it will destroy your gut microbiome and make you messed up for years and years and give you poor health. Well, maybe they don't believe in that solution and they believe in some other solution, right? So, I mean, for everybody, they're going to have some feeling of what's right and what's wrong. And the person who comes to the doctor for their amoxicillin believes that that's true. So the person who comes to the church and listens to the pastor preach, and they hear these passages, in Hebrews, one of the elemental teachings is that there's eternal punishment, right? So they hear that and they take it. This is God's word. This must be true. And, if it feels like there's something weird about it, well, then it must be me. I must not understand. But it feels so true. I mean, it feels so true. When you're in that frame, it feels so true. It does not feel like you're making an excuse or just, oh, like I just am, I'm not empathetic. I'm not loving enough, like that. Those explanations don't seem true when you're inside the frame. It feels like you're just accepting what's objectively true, and it feels good. It feels good to have that belief. So, I mean, I can't really say, like, all in all, like, what do you do? What do you do when you have someone who and love, who has the religious belief that, maybe if you're not in their religion, you're going to burn forever in hell? Like, how do you navigate that situation? I mean, I think some people would say, well, I'll try to tell you, okay, yes, I am a follower of Allah. Yes, I am. And then they say, well, I don't believe you. You don't do this. You don't do that. And, like, what are you supposed to do? Right. I mean, because if you have a different perspective, from their perspective, it's objective that you will go to hell. Like, I mean, there's nothing I can do. Like, I don't know. And then from your perspective, well, that's not objective. Like, I don't even agree with you. Right. So, like, I think this is a basis of a lot of conflict, right? Is that different people have a different perspective, even of what's objective. So, I mean, I think it really is a complicated issue that I think if we really try to understand what it feels like from the inside, then, maybe we can have a little bit more tolerance as we have the conversation, not to be so upset, or, like we can just say, okay, that's okay. It's fine. And we can have our own convictions, and that's good.
Yeah. Great. So that was a lot.
That was a lot.
Yeah. And
There's our baby.
That's totally okay. That's all right. So, I think you have said a lot of great important stuff, To answer Josh's question quickly, I would just say that we should wish well to all, and if wishing well to all involves like wishing well to all cannot involve eternal torture of someone. You really need a good reason for that. You need to show me that the reality is such that torture is required to prevent like a greater disaster or something, right? Like torturing these 10 people is required, or reality itself will like be destroyed or something, or like all other people will then brutally suffer or something, right? Like just saying that God said so in the book is not going is just not enough for me. And I think one thing Rachel said was like, to the person it's like objective, uh right, that uh so uh it's like objective.
Sorry, I mean, Rajat, this is the best argument right here. I mean, this
Yeah,
baby right here, I'm gonna give it the freedom
yeah,
to
it's like
fall to a
whenever I say the
bottomless
word
pit.
objective, he responds, so that made me laugh, right?
Yeah,
So it's like, so yeah, so to the person who believes in it, in eternal hell, who says like, yeah, that's objective word of God, it's like, well, we are, if we are thinking about robust moral realism, just like if God just handed down a book that says, yeah, kill a bunch of people there, and then kill a bunch of people there, and then in that book God also write, because it makes me feel good, it makes God feel good, right? A little bit, right? The word is written down from the perspective of every single human. That is an objective word, right? It's written, right? uh it's mind independently true for only human beings, right? But for God, well, for God, it seems like it seems like he's just telling you to do what he wants, right? So it's like, it doesn't seem objective to me. It's not intuitive at all. Like that all that stuff like gets into moral epistemology anyways. But I do think like intuitionist moral epistemology, like of Michael Humer, and like moral sense theory of like Francis Hutcheson, and like some of these major philosophers, that is true. And we should be intuitionists rather than just saying, okay, here's a book, God handed down this book to us, and it says kill a bunch of people, right? Torture a bunch of people, right? Like, no, that book must be false. Our intuitions are true. Respect your intuitions, man. Respect your feelings, I think sometimes, so yeah, I think we talked about that free will, eternal hell. Now the last thing we are going to talk about is practical effects. It's going to be short. uh I just want to show you this talk between a YouTuber, Destiny, and a person who left his religion, uh who was a traditionalist, and like he talked about eternal hell. I think you both are going to like it, and also the audience probably too. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. Okay, can you see the screen?
Mhm.
Okay, great. So this is the YouTuber Destiny. He's like generally a political commentator, right? He's pretty good, I think. So he's talking with a person who left his religion, and in his religion there was eternal hell, right? That retributive kind. And here's his like basic story. It's a quick story, it will not take too much time. So let me play that. Uh, you will hear the sound. If you do not hear it, um, please say that.
One of my personal experiences is the reason why
So can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I use this story to make my case as well. Because when I was a kid, I was very scared of going to hell. And I couldn't understand why other people were not terrified. Like it seemed like everybody around me believed in hell, but nobody was that concerned about going there,
Yeah.
even though it was a real possibility. Like people were more worried about their grades, careers, fashion, cars, or anything other, like the party next week. But it seemed like people believe that there's this place that you're going to be screaming for a very, very long time, and angels are going to be torturing you and pouring molten lead down your throat. But people didn't seem to be worried about going. This is actually described in the Quran.
Yeah.
So I remember crying about it, and I remember my aunt actually finding out that this was pre-elementary school. She told me, "Don't worry, Armin. Only like rapists and murderers go to hell." But then when I actually went to school, they told us actually no, most people, including most Muslims, are going to go to hell. My parents were nominal Muslims. They drink alcohol. They only went to a mosque only when somebody died or when somebody was getting married. They never fasted. They never prayed.
Yeah.
And I asked my teachers, "Are they going to go to hell?" And they were like, "Yeah, they're going to go to hell, of course." So I was very upset about that as well. And the thing that I learned in school was that for in Islam there's no sin before age of maturity, right? The age of reason, right? Again, this is many years later I learned that Christianity is actually you're born with sin, but this is not in Islam. That's not the case. In Islam, if you're a child, you cannot have sin because you're not mature enough to be held responsible for your actions, right?
Yeah.
So you have to hit the age of reason. And again, the specifics of this is different among Muslims, but the way we learned it in school is that the age of reason for boys is 15 and for girls is 9. So that meant that there's no way for me, there's no way for me to sin before age 15, right? Suicide is a sin in Islam, but then I put 2 and 2 together. I was like, well, suicide can't be a sin if I commit suicide before age 15. So I felt like I found a loophole in the system. I felt like, okay, if I kill myself before age 15, I die without sin, so I can't go to hell, so I end up in heaven. So why wouldn't I just kill myself before age 15 and make sure I don't go to hell?
Yeah.
So to make sure that I got this right, I went to my religious teacher and I'd ask him, why wouldn't I just kill myself to make sure that I don't go to hell? And he said, well, because if you go to heaven because you died as a child, you go to the lowest part of heaven. Because you didn't earn heaven.
Yeah.
Like apparently heaven has different layers, and the best part is where the martyrs go, and that's where Muhammad is. And the lowest part is where people go who died before they were getting the chance to sin. I thought to myself, I don't give a fuck which part of heaven I go to. I just don't want to burn. I could take I could take a parking lot for eternity if that guarantees me not burning. I actually lit a match, and I put it on my arm to see how much it hurts.
Yeah.
And then I imagined that like all over my body for 5 minutes. And I like, this is unimaginable pain. I can't tolerate this for 5 minutes. How could I tolerate this for thousands of years? So I jumped out of the window in my school. I broke both my legs. I broke my left arm. I fractured my back. I was in a wheelchair and my bed for like 7 months. I missed 1 year of school. The only reason why I didn't try it again is because I saw what it did to my parents. I saw my mom collapse in the ground in the hospital. I saw my dad cry for the first time. They blamed themselves because I didn't tell them why I did this. But yeah, and that's why I didn't try it. And when I hit age 15, I was like, shit, I have to play this game now because the consequences of losing is so high. I need to be a proper Muslim now. So I became very religious. I lost a lot of friends because of that, because I was in the more liberal part of the city.
So
It's heartbreaking.
that was a scary story, like, I mean, it kind of, to me, when I hear that, like, if you really believe in eternal hell, then yeah, I mean, that makes sense, man. I mean, why would you not, if age of accountability is 15, why would you not try to, commit suicide, go to even to the lowest part of heaven rather than
Yeah.
in eternal hell? right? So these
Mhm.
are supposed to be the practical effects of believing in eternal hell, where some
It's so
people,
interesting because I think in Christianity there is some notion of something called the age of accountability.
yeah,
So that when you're very young, maybe you're still not liable for your sin. Because there is a debate inside Christianity whether you're born innocent, whether you're born tabula rasa, whether you're born with sin. So different Christians believe different things, but I think I don't know if there's any set age of how old you are, but my impression would be much younger, like that when you're 7 years old, you know what you're doing. I mean,
yeah,
I guess it does seem very tragic, because I remember one time, Josh, I mean, you can tell the story. You were you were asking your brother Joey, right? I mean, you go ahead, and I think you know what I'm talking about. No, you don't. Um, I just remember when we were at your brother Joey's house, and we were just visiting for a holiday or something, and Josh started to talk with his brother about if it really is true that when a person passes the age of accountability, that there is a real chance that they could go to hell forever. Wouldn't it be better just to abort all the babies, or kill all the children, like just kill them now so that they don't have any chance of going to hell. I mean, I remember it's the same conversation. It's just fascinating to me. I think people are having the same conversations no matter which religion they're brought up in. I mean, we're all wrestling with the same questions, you know.
Yeah, I had
So
that
I
conversation with
yeah.
Joey, as well as with my mom too. I just remember
Mhm.
being perplexed by that. I mean, if there's this age of accountability, why take the risk? Why not just kill everybody before that age? Forget about killing yourself, like also kill all your friends and, get everybody
Mhm.
dead. So they could just go straight to heaven. And then it's like, well, wait a second, why doesn't God himself just do that? If
Right.
there is an accountability, of course, the alternative is you just die as a baby and then you wake up in hell forever and ever, which
Right.
seems too hard for most people to believe that. So they come up with these other systems to kind of explain how, well, if you're innocent when you die, you haven't reached the age of accountability, then you can go to heaven. There's of course different views on that, but I think what this all shows is that these beliefs aren't just theoretical. I mean, Rajat, you're citing recent peer-reviewed ethical theory, and it can get very abstract and theoretical, but
yeah.
citing things that are so important, because they're highlighting an analysis that has very, very real practical effects that show up in our lives in terms of, okay, what's the nature of our future? Is it bright for ourselves only? Is it bright for everybody? And then how can I feel like my future is bright knowing that half of other human beings has a horrible future ahead?
And if they
So a
already
huge
have the
effect.
horrible, yeah, if they already have a horrible future, well, let's try to prevent that
Right.
by, you know,
Well,
Yeah.
now you know the motivation of the Crusades and the Inquisitions, and I mean, like you said earlier, I mean, if God wouldn't be, if it wouldn't be impermissible for God to use a physical force to stop someone from a horrible outcome, I mean, if it really is true, from our human perspective that if someone doesn't believe something, or if they don't do something, they're going to go to eternal suffering. Well, then we might as well try to burn them a little bit or torture them a little bit to get them to change their mind. Like, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, because, it's like a sliding spectrum. Where do you, where do you draw the line there? Right. I mean, it is a very practical, real dilemma. I mean, so real that it caused somebody to jump out a window, I mean, it's really horrible,
yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, Josh, there. And I agree with Rachel, by the way, about well, eternal hell creates lots of practical problems. Sorry, I interrupted you, Josh. What were you saying?
Well, just that's pretty much it. That the analysis has very practical, real life effects for every single person who's living in this world, no matter which religion or non-religion you come from, no matter what your upbringing. This is, I mean, I don't know, I'm not just being cliche about it. I don't think you can overemphasize the significance of this question of the fate of people, or the the future of people. I don't want to use the word fates because that carries, maybe there's not free will, but the future of people is so important. And I could just tell you, yeah, from my own upbringing, kind of thinking about these things, I think that there was, Rachel and I were talking about this not that long ago, I think earlier this week, that kind of when you're a child, you don't really yet have the capacity to analyze the things that are in your environment so much. And so there were certain viewpoints about other people and other religions that, weren't in the religion of my own, of mine, that when I was 4 or 5 years old, I didn't have a knowledge of people through empathy to understand the implications of these different theories. And then when I got older, it did lead to a kind of perplexing question about, okay, what does happen? I mean, you gave a video of somebody from a Muslim perspective. Well, a common view from a Christian perspective is that if you're a good Muslim, you're not safe. Okay, you have to be a good Christian to be safe. So this is a very common thing, right? You have to be kind of part of the right tribe, and
Yeah.
of course there's always a story about it. So it's submission to Allah or receiving grace through Christ. There's always a way of kind of drawing out like what it is at root. But the idea that so many of my friends at school are, if they died that day, I remember thinking that, like, okay, if Jeremy dies today, then he's lost forever. And not just like annihilated, but suffering forever. And it was hard for me to understand that, because then I started to have more empathy. As I got older, I started to understand other people's perspectives. But I had a theology that made it difficult to really sort that out. It wasn't really until later, much later actually, that I was able to kind of revisit some of those theological fences and kind of go closer to them and kind of look at the theological data points and say, oh, this is actually not a fence. I thought it was a fence. People said don't go over there, but it's just not. It looks different under scrutiny, and so I think that I'm glad that you were showing that video and kind of landing on the practical effects, because it's not just theory, it really does affect our lives. It's very important to think this through.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Catholic Church, I think, still believes that there is no salvation outside the church, right? That is still a major doctrine in the Catholic Church. Even though, like, after second Vatican, a lot of Catholics have become much more liberal, right? Much more uh, religious, pluralist, I suppose, right? Much more respecting of other religions, I suppose,
If
right?
I could just add a note on that, it is
Yeah.
interesting. I do have some Catholic friends who would be hopeful universalists or also just actual universalists.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I'm thinking now of Keith DeRose's article, Universalism in the Bible. This is that Christian philosopher from Yale University who makes a case from biblical data for universalism, universal salvation. And what's interesting is he says that one could be an exclusivist, a religious exclusivist, but think that everybody eventually goes through that narrow path. He
Yeah.
uses the example of going through the path of Christ. If you add the church, if you add something. And so I would also want to almost like minimize the barriers to this view, by the unnecessary barriers to the view, by just making the distinctions, right? That you could have a certain view of salvation that's more exclusive, but still think everybody makes it through that road. And of course, you could also have a more pluralistic view as well. So this is kind of, I think, a theme of the conversation is we sort of divide and conquer views, retribution, utilitarianism, free will, no free will, every view, when you analyze it, interestingly enough, there's a pathway in that view to this positive vision of reality. So to me, that's actually quite encouraging.
Yeah. Great. So, okay, I think we have discussed the free will, eternal hell, and practical effects a little bit, and I think yeah, for this video, I think it's complete, right? So I'm going to stop the recording now.